So there is something tricky that I see when it comes to talking to kids online about whether or not they've experienced abuse. And that is that there is a distinction between what is legally considered abuse and what we are in our society morally considering to be abuse. So there's like a level of abuse that can occur, and that when you're an adult, you look back and you go, oh, this was abusive. And my parents shouldn't have done this. But it doesn't rise to the level of legal abuse. Particularly, it's going to depend on the jurisdiction you're in. So there's different countries, even different areas in different countries. They may have different legislation requiring that physical abuse, for example, actually leave marks. And then there are some places that don't have that requirement. The requirement for emotional or verbal abuse is often a lot higher than what we would say is abusive in a parent-child dynamic. If we're telling kids like, yes, you're experiencing abuse, you should tell a trusted adult. With the idea that like Child Protective Services is going to get involved, or that some sort of government entity or the police or whatever is going to get involved. That's not necessarily the case, and it's confusing for children, especially if they're being told by a bunch of adults online that this is the situation. So we want to be careful when we're talking to kids. There's usually only one shot that they will take to tell an adult. That's another reason why I don't tell children to talk to a teacher, because there are many kids who took like that one shot to tell an adult. They told a teacher because they were assured by all these grown-ups online that a teacher is a mandated reporter, and then their teacher basically like brushed them off and didn't take them seriously. And so, I tend to direct children toward a trusted adult, or like a child abuse prevention nonprofit. Um, that's sort of one way to get in the door to getting resources or getting responsible adults looking at a situation, because they often have relationships with like the police and child protective services. So they already have like contacts. So if a child can get to somebody who is in a position of knowledge and contacts, things can start to be put into place. Or if they can tell like a trusted adult, that adult will be supportive and hopefully start to investigate the options and get the process moving on behalf of the child. But I don't necessarily, I can't specifically recommend a guidance counselor. I can't specifically recommend a teacher. It's going to depend on the child's relationship with that person and whether or not they trust them. So, it's just very important to recognize that when we are talking to children, that they don't have like a complete understanding of a situation, that they don't understand, sort of like the nuances. And there is a big difference between abusive behavior that is actionable by the state and abusive behavior that is not okay, but there's not really anything that the state can do about it because it doesn't rise to the level of the state being able to take action. So, that would be something that they would process maybe in therapy, or they might process as an adult looking back at their childhood. But it's that expectation that you're being abused, tell a mandated reporter, adults are going to get involved. We don't necessarily know that. And also, when we're talking about things online, people are looking at, you have no idea where this kid lives. The laws may be different. You never know how Child Protective Services is going to respond. And so there are all these kind of things in play. I know for me, whenever I'm speaking to a child victim of abuse and I'm trying to answer their question about, is this abuse, it's more nuanced than just a yes or no. Anyway, I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you next time.